Welcome back to another episode of the podcast, From the Depths of Darkness to the Light of Success. I am your host, Chris Swick, and on this podcast, we talk about mental health, addictions, ADHD, and really anything anyone's afraid to talk about, we talk about it on the show. But before we get started, I believe everyone's story is valuable at the end of the day. Does not matter what walk of life you come from. You're all welcome on my platform. Head over to the YouTube channel, same name as the podcast, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications. Head over to Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever the hell you can find your podcast. Check it out over there. And hit me up over on Instagram in the DMs at Depths of Darkside. And I'd be happy to have a chat with you if you're down or just want to check out my content. But with no further ado, I'd love to introduce you to my next guest. It's been a little bit in the making, but we got Marc Ronick. You correct me, but that's okay. How are you doing today, Marc?
Good. Now, Chris, I'm a little sad for you because there's a very easy way to remember how to pronounce my last name, and it's based off of the name of my business, which is Ironic. Ronick is the way to pronounce it.
Well, fair enough. But yeah, I'm happy to hear you're doing very well. You just got back from vacation.
Yeah.
So first, what really got you into podcasting before podcasting even blew up 15 years ago?
Yeah, and it's now almost 16 years this summer. What got me into it was professional football. I am an NFL fan and have been pretty much all my life. And when I got into college, my fraternity brothers introduced me to fantasy football, which at the time also was not terribly known yet in the world. So I fell in love with fantasy football. It gave me a whole new perspective on how to watch the game, and it got me into watching other games besides my own home team. So I really took to it, and through those years of college, got so into it and continued doing it after college. And then I was already dabbling with podcasting, but I believe I had really gotten into podcasting from finding fantasy football related podcasts and quickly realizing where it was such a young budding industry, there wasn't a lot out there yet. And from what I heard, there were definitely ones I liked and some still are around to this day. But I just felt, I think a lot of people starting out with podcasting do, I felt I can do it better than those guys, or I know I could do just as good of a job, or maybe I know more than some of these guys. So I gathered a couple people and we started a fantasy football podcast. And that in the nutshell is how it started. And then it completely evolved from there. But yes, that fantasy football is the way I got into podcasting.
That's amazing. And I like that you talk about that. Sometimes I'll still dabble once in a blue moon, but not very often anymore. But on sports betting, that's what gets me into the game a little bit. If you're betting on another team or whatever, but I love playing. I'm a fantasy hockey guy. So every fall, I love getting together. It's like a camaraderie with on my parents' street there. And there's about 12 to 15 of us that get together and pick our teams. And we have a playoff pool. It's so much fun just to get that camaraderie.
Yeah. And fantasy hockey is absolutely a very popular hobby, gambling, whatever we want to call it, kind of thing. and actually that leads me into where I got my first paying gig in podcasting. I was contracted by a company that I believe is still out there today, Blog Talk Radio. And they were really one of the first live streaming platforms for podcasting. I had my show on their platform and I started to reach out to get to know the higher ups. And long story short, I convinced them to hire me to build out a fantasy sports channel. And it was a live streaming internet-based channel of all different fantasy sports talk, from hockey to football to golf, you name it, any sport, you can attach fantasy to it. And it was a live streaming platform, 8 hours straight a day of live content. And then we would do the reruns, if you will, in the off hours. And that thing blew up. I'm talking like millions of listeners. And as much as it blew up, I could not convince Blog Talk Radio to invest more time, more money into it to help it really grow. And what ended up happening was Sirius XM Radio, I think, got word that this is a popular thing. And they actually took a bunch of the hosts that we had and started the Fantasy Sports Radio, which is around to this day and quite popular on their platform. If Blog Talk Radio were mine to be owned, I probably would be upset about that, but lost opportunity for them. It was flattering for me to realize some big company like that saw this idea and ran with it. And I'm glad somebody did. Yeah.
If you don't run with it, someone else is going to in any industry. It doesn't matter if it's podcasting, photography, a jewelry business, whatever it is. If you're thinking about it, someone's already going to be doing it. If you have an idea, go do it.
Yes. Yeah. Test it out. See if it works. Yeah. Don't be afraid if it doesn't. That's the only way you're going to know, is to put it out there, test it, see what happens, and make adjustments if you really believe it's something that's worthwhile.
So what's the favorite football team of yours, buddy?
So I moved to the Washington, D.C. area when I was 7 years old. And basically, other than college, have been here ever since. And so at the time, the Washington Redskins, now the Washington Commanders, which I'm not used to saying that yet. And I understand the reasoning for the name change, and I just still not used to it yet.
Yeah, and lots of people aren't used to it. It's like the whatever the Cleveland Indians name it is now too. You know what I mean? Like I'm not used to hearing that when I hear the what team's that?
Yeah. Yeah. What sport is that? Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. It takes a while to get used to.
for sure, man. I'm a diehard Steelers fan.
Oh, I love the Steelers. They're one of the teams I probably respect the most in the National Football League, and their fans too. I think the best fans around.
Nice, yeah, no, and I'd love to get to Heinz sometime. I've never been there, so I really got to get there. And maybe this year's the year. Who knows?
Yeah. I've been outside their stadium. I've not been inside.
I heard it's a wild one, especially and then like when it's a windy day. I've heard from people, especially the way the incline is on their the upper bowl and stuff like that. It starts feeling like it's shaking and stuff
Yeah.
right on the river
Right.
there.
Yep.
So if you were a superhero, Mark, what would your power be and why?
So I can only get one power.
You only get one power, man.
Oh, man, that is a hard one, because I could go with some of the easy ones like strength or flying. It might be something like time travel.
I
And
like
I
that,
think
you know, like,
and I think it would be time travel because, and I know we'll dig into this some, but as a guy who has ADD and was diagnosed as an adult, I tend to overthink a lot. And it I have a hard time making decisions sometimes. And so if I had that ability to time travel, it wouldn't necessarily be to change time, but it would give me, at the very least, it'd give me some peace of mind on the direction I go, or that I'm thinking about going. So I think maybe time travel would be the one. And I'm a huge fan of Back to the Future, so why not?
I love that movie. One of my favorite, not the top of my list, but I watched that over and over as a child.
Yeah. I
Which
do
one
it
was
to
your
the adult
favorite?
too. Of the three?
Yeah.
Of the three, I think the original has to be my favorite. I love different parts of the other two movies. I love the beginning of Back to the Future 2. I love that future scene. And I do love the Wild West from 3. But I think overall, if you don't have one, you don't have the other two. So I
Exactly.
got to go with that one.
You know, Michael J. Fox does an amazing job, and
Oh, man.
his partner in that movie too. So
Yeah, he's the
uh,
best.
he is the best. And for me, for my superhero power, I think I'd have to just spreading kindness. There's not enough kindness in the world, man. I wish there was more kindness. People recently, I try and give some change. Yes, it might not be going to the right thing. When I see a guy sitting outside the store or something like that, at one point in time, I was almost there myself. Try to give back and be kind to others.
I love that. I love that because it's one that is realistic. It's one that you could walk out today and embrace as your superpower and make a difference in this world, even if it's one person at a time. Yeah, I love that a lot.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Let's touch a little bit on the ADD. I didn't even know that you had been diagnosed. Now, what age were you diagnosed?
I was
Are you on medication?
Yeah, I was diagnosed in I'll just say my mid 20s, maybe even a little later. Maybe even a little later. It could have been my late 20s, early 30s. And my parents, as a kid, my parents had me tested, and they said whoever tested me said I did not have ADD. Quite frankly, I always believed I did. And I always believed that was a misdiagnosis, but I never followed up on it at all until I took a job, and it was more corporate than what I had been used to prior to it. And there were more moving parts, and there were lots of spreadsheets and keeping up to date with everything. And I started to struggle with it because I was hired and I came in kicking a lot of ass and really making big differences for the company. And then started noticing when I started sliding and realizing I was struggling. And I decided, I don't know what it was, but something in me told me to go back and revisit ADD. Actually, you know what? It wasn't even that something told me to. It was, I think I was starting to feel depressed because I could not figure out why I couldn't catch up to the rest of the people that I was working with. I know I'm a smart guy. I know I've done big things in my life, even up to that point. It was this struggle. And so I was getting depressed. And so I went to get help for that, thinking that was the thing that needed to be helped. And when I sat down with the psychiatrist, he started asking questions. It sounds to me more like you've got ADD. And that was when I said to him, I was already tested for that as a kid. And he said, let's test anyway. And we went through that process. And sure enough, he said, yeah, you have ADD, and prescribed Adderall. And I'm still to this day, take it really, I do take it most weekday mornings when I'm working just to kick things in. I don't do it daily. I don't feel like on a weekend that I really need it. And what I'm starting to realize also is, well, not realize, but I'm starting to wonder what some of my alternatives are. And I've been exploring alternatives because I don't want to depend on a medication like that for too long. And it's been too long already. And my wife constantly encourages me to work on finding other alternatives as well. It doesn't sit well with her. My wife has been on a physical health journey for a while now and has really had her eyes open to the world of holistic medicine. And so that's definitely an area I'm exploring in regard to my ADD as well.
And I myself, I take something called Full Quest. It's a 12-hour release, not cheap, but it was
Hmm.
what started working for me. I had tried so many different avenues, especially after getting cleaned up and sober 3 years ago, is really when my mental illnesses and mental health issues really arose because for so long I was just burying them with all these illicit drugs and stuff like that, hard drugs.
Yeah, self-medicating.
Just self-medicating at the end of the day, exactly.
Yeah.
Just drowning my sorrows in that and not taking care of the underlying issues, and once I started doing that, started taking care, and still this day, every day is, taking care of something. For my ADHD, though, I do notice if I don't take my medication in the morning, I take it every morning, try to take it around the same time, and it does last through the day. We found the right median right now, but I myself too would like to get to a point where we can go the holistic road as well. I know my fiance is exploring that route as well with her chronic pain, with her fibromyalgia. So there's different things like holistic doctors and stuff like that to get some blood work done and some other things done too that normal practitioners do not dig into, and seeing what kind of route we could go with those types of things. Obviously, stress is a big factor with the fibromyalgia, and her having mono about 10 to 15 years ago. That's what really kicked this one off because it really attacked her nervous system and her nerve receptors to their pain receptors. So it really heightens it, especially when stress and anxiety kicks in with her too. So we're exploring different avenues, and it's nothing wrong with exploring that holistic route, in my opinion. There's lots of proven factors. Do your own research. This is not a doctor show, everyone, just so you know,
Yeah.
just our opinions, and we're entitled to them and just open to sharing them. And hopefully it'll help someone though, too, man.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying too, is I haven't made any big decisions yet if that's my route to go. And it's something I would encourage anyone just to explore. What are your options? I think the more options that are out there, the better off you'll be, because I don't believe there's a magic pill out there for everybody. I think what works for some doesn't work for others and vice versa. So yeah, explore your options, see what works for you and go from there. And the big thing, even perhaps more importantly for me than finding the right medication, is finding the right tools to work with my ADD. And that's actually call it divine timing that we're sitting down talking about this, because over the past few weeks, I have been hyper focused on figuring out ways to use my ADD to my advantage, to understand the programming that my brain has in comparison to the average brain that's out there, and to embrace how it works for that, like I said, to take advantage of how it works, because I think that there are advantages to it. And it's just a matter of understanding the programming. I've been lately comparing it. It's most people there, the percentages say that many more people have PC Windows based computers than Apple. Yes, Apple's on the rise and Apple's up there, and maybe it's surpassed since then. But go with me on this. For me, it's like I have got the Mac brain, and the majority has the PC brain, and it's just a matter of getting used to the operating system and figuring out how to make it work best for me. And there's little differences, just those little differences go a long way.
100%. And I love that you bring up hyper focus. My fiance says sometimes we always talk about hyper focus with me, and sometimes I get a little overboard though. If I gotta, it's like I get into that almost manic state where I get all these creative ideas, but way too many of them. I start overloading the brain.
Yeah.
All right, which one are we gonna do now? Which one are we gonna do today? Tomorrow? Chris, we got to reel it back in and let's focus on the task at hand, and then we'll move on to the next one. Sometimes they're just like getting this thing together. It's going to be piece by piece, getting the new studio together, and that's okay. It wasn't going to happen overnight. Chris thought it was going to at first.
All right.
One piece at a time. We've got the desk. We've got some certain things in here. The microphones will come. The setup to have in-person interviews in the studio sooner than later, but it's not going to happen overnight. And I got to remember that.
Yes, yes, and that is, I think, a symptom of ADD, and, and
100%.
just wanting that next best thing, that great idea you have, and wanting to go with it because it feels so intense in our bodies and in our heads, and we want to get that out, and we want to do something with it, and sometimes then leave all the other things that are on the burners. We leave them there while we're focusing on this next great thing. So yeah, it can be challenging sometimes.
And that's just like my workflow. Like I every time I record an episode, like I write down a list. I have a list of all the guests I've had on, but if I don't write record or REC beside it, I'll forget if I've recorded.
What?
Where the hell is this file? You know what I mean? But if I've written record, clearly I've recorded it. So I do that every time I have my guest list and just put REC beside it. And then I know I've recorded it right before I even record with them. I know it's recorded and I know, okay, that one's recorded. You know, you can just go download the file and start editing.
Love it. Yeah, that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
And yeah, so how do you keep life balanced between work and personal life, especially with your ADD?
Yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur and I've let my business consume me and spill into my personal life. Like I remember late nights when even though my business is only a couple years old, I've been hired by people to produce podcasts for years, and my own podcasts as well. And I remember late nights sitting on the couch, editing and putting the pieces together. And when that's time I could have been spending with my wife, with my kids. And I was so focused on that it was a disadvantage. It was not helping me. And I think that when I started this business, I recognized I needed to set some boundaries, both mentally and physically. And one of those boundaries physically was to have my work area in a completely separate area of the house. I have the advantage of I've got a basement, and so I set up a studio in the basement, and that's to help keep work in one place. When I'm downstairs, that's my work time. So it's like leaving work, leaving the office, getting in the car and going home. When I go upstairs, I really do everything I can to keep work and personal life separate. Sure, there are exceptions along the way. There's something big going on, or maybe there's a new client that's about ready to sign and it's after hours. I'm not going to ignore it. I'm going to deal with it. But the day-to-day activities of work, I've physically set those boundaries, and that's helped me then mentally set those boundaries as well. If I'm upstairs and some kind of a call or some kind of alert that something's going on with work, I stop and really question, is this something I have to do right now, or can it wait until tomorrow? Is this really truly an emergency? Most of the time, the answer is no, because let's face it, we're talking about podcasting here. This isn't rocket science. This isn't surgery. So most of the time, it can wait. So it's setting those physical and mental boundaries.
So with podcasting too, and I like that you put that too, like you have your studio space in the basement, that's your workspace. And I love having a studio to go to because at my place, we don't have an area for that. So that's why we have a photography studio between me and my fiance, my podcasting studio and stuff that I'm building. That being said, I'm really trying to do the same thing as well. This is where I do my editing. Like yes, I have a laptop at home. I could hop on and do that. If I had to do a quick thing, like edit on a piece of content or something like that, but for the most part, this is where all the magic happens. This is where all the creation happens. And when I leave here, I try not to, worry about it unless, hey, I really like this guest. I'm going to send them a quick message. Boom. That's it. Here's my calendar link if you'd like to book an episode with me or something like that. But I'll do that right away because that's right on the top of my brain. But that takes 2 seconds, quick voice note, and be on with my day. But like you said too, like I'm in sales still. I know I'm not full time with the podcasting gig or content creation as of yet. Hopefully sooner than later. You never know. I try to keep my work separate too, even from the car dealership as well. Like when I leave there, I try not to. I really try hard. This can wait till tomorrow morning. And if they don't like it, oh, like I'm not going to answer an email from a client at 10:30 at night that they sent me. Yes, the alert comes through to my phone, but I don't need to answer it.
No.
The car dealership's not open. I can't do anything right now. I'm not at my desk. I'm not in front of my computer
Yeah.
at work or nothing. So there's nothing I can really do at this moment other than send them an email back. I'll get back to you tomorrow, but who cares? I'm not going to bother that because that just entertains more of a conversation if I reply.
Yep. And look, let's face it.
And then you're setting out your boundaries though. You're saying it's okay to message me at 11 o'clock at night. Then if you start responding to all these
Yeah,
people too.
that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, it's setting boundaries with other people as well. Yeah, and the moment you start falling into those after hour traps of responding to clients or vendors or whoever you're working with, yeah, it's hard to back out of that. It's hard to change that afterward, where they're going to start expecting responses at any hour of the day or night. And yeah, to reestablish those boundaries can be challenging.
Now, with that being said, getting into content creation, editing a little bit myself on the side too. I know you've been doing this for a long time. I wanted to ask the question to someone that's been in the business a long time. Payment. How do you take your payment now? Hey, say it. So let's just we'll make a little role play here. Chris reaches out to Mark for some content creation or some editing services and stuff like that. All right, I got 10 episodes I want you to do. Do you take the full payment up front? Do you do half? How do you do it?
So a lot of clients that I work with, they come to me to launch their podcast.
Yeah.
So what I'll do with them is, yeah, I give them a package deal where it's going to be roughly 6 to 8 weeks, depends on them and how quickly they want to move, but roughly,
Yeah.
let's say 6 weeks. And it will include everything from, your concept to your launch. And what I'm
So
going to do,
intro, outro, all those types of
all
things
that
in there.
stuff, picking
Yeah.
the right music, picking the right format, picking what works for them to make them as good of a host as they can possibly be.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I do charge upfront for that. And it includes 4 or 5 episodes done, ready to go by
Yeah.
launch. And I charge upfront, and I'm not going to move on that with them until
Thank you.
they've actually
Thank
paid
you. You know what? And I'm the same way since I've been doing it. I've been burned other areas. I'm not saying I've been getting better. I was untrustworthy at one time too. So I would understand if someone didn't want to give me that money, but I'm trying to build that trust with others now in the community of podcasting and beyond sort of thing too. Even doing some consulting and those types of things too. And if you don't like it, then I guess we'll move on to the next person. But now there's boundaries though too. I'm not gonna name names or anything like that, but like I had a client recently too that, oh, can you do this? Can you know this is what you hired me for? This is what I'm doing. I'm not doing graphic design for you now, too. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though I didn't outright answer, hey, I have this product that I use. They asked, I just said, this is how you do it if you'd like to use the free version. And
Yeah.
that's that. But if you overstep that boundary, like we were talking about before, per se answering clients after hours, but if you start saying, hey, yeah, I'll do that for free, then they just start you there's lots of people out there that will, if you give them an inch, they're gonna grab a mile and run with it. A
Yeah.
lot of time. I find that a lot, especially in the content creation world lately, I don't know about you, but so I am glad that it's not just me about the payment up front because that's the way it has to be. Because if I'm gonna spend, let's say I was editing an episode, taking out all the filler words, correcting the audio and all that stuff, it's not cheap. You know what I mean? Like it's even for a half-hour episode, it's 2 hours worth of work minimum to do
Right.
all that, just those two things.
Yeah, and your time is valuable, and especially to them because they don't wanna do it. Yeah, your time is valuable, and I've never, knock on wood, I guess, I've never had this issue. Maybe that's because I am taking the money up front all the time, but I wasn't motivated to do that because I got burned. It's a practice that I wanted to instill to prevent things like that because, yeah, you're right, it takes a lot of time and a lot of work, and, yeah, I could maybe consider doing something like a deposit up front, but the moment I am spending a minute or more on going to collect payment, it's costing me money.
It's wasting your time now that you could have been valuable time spent working on another project for yourself, for a client.
Yep.
So I don't want to have that hassle. And that's where I tell everyone, and most of them are pretty good upfront. Hey, this is what it's going to cost. Once you send me your content, whatever you want done, send me that payment and let's work on a date that you need this done by. Some people, a couple of my clients are pretty flexible because they have so much content going on. Just get it to me in the next couple of weeks, Chris. They're pretty lax. And I like those clients too. I like working with those types of clients too.
Mhm.
They're not, hey, do you have that done? Do you have this? This is the hours I work. I'm not going to, if I have to work late one night, that's fine with me too. So
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Yes.
Mark, what are you most proud of in your past?
Wow. I'm certainly proud of my kids. And
How many do you have?
so I have my daughter. She
Okay.
is going to be 20 in March. And
Oh, you're really showing your age, Mark.
yeah, no kidding. And then I have two stepkids,
Awesome.
are a year apart from her in either direction. So in total, we've got a base. We've got currently an 18, 19, and 20-year-old.
Nice
Uh,
blended family.
yeah, yeah, it's great. And there's lots I'm proud of myself for, and I say that proudly. I think probably most recently, I'm proud of my personal growth journey and the ability to keep my mind open and keep feeding my brain with new perspective, new information to help me grow as a person. And over these past 3 to 4 years, I've really started to embrace personal growth and being that best person that I can be. And I've done things, I think I mentioned to you not too long ago. I've taken on things like 75 hard. Did I mention that to you recently?
I'd mentioned that we were talking. You actually inspired me. I'd heard about the book too, the 5 a.m. Club. You inspired me to go grab it from the library, man.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
got to do
good.
that. I'm probably just going to go buy a copy of it because it's not something that maybe just read once, or you can go back and go to certain parts of it too. So
Yeah. Yeah. The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. That was probably the first, I don't want to call it a challenge, but the first program that I instilled in at the beginning of my personal growth journey. And it's basically what it sounds like. It's the practice of getting up early in the morning. And technically, it's actually before 5, and it's starting your morning routine at 5 a.m. because for lots of reasons.
20 rule.
That's right. And then there are 3 pockets that you are filling during that hour, minimum of 20 minutes of movement, then it's mindfulness, and then it's 20 minutes of education, knowledge, that
Reading,
kind of thing.
writing, whatever you want to do, even watching an educational YouTube video if you want to add that, if you like watching the video. But he really pushes to stay off that phone, stay off that social media
Oh
for
yeah.
that hour though.
Yeah. And that's a
I don't
big yep,
suggest picking up YouTube.
right. That was a big one for me, is staying off social media. And I'm sure a lot of your audience can relate to this. It's like you
I can
wake up.
relate myself. I'm
Yeah.
bad for it still.
You wake up and one of the first things you probably do is reach for your phone and you check your social media. And if you're using social media for your business, even more tempting to want to go and check it and see how things did overnight from your post yesterday. Did I get this many followers? All that stuff. And in that lately, I've really been embracing social media as one of my areas to bring in business. And it's been really challenging to stay off it the first thing in the morning. So, yes, the overall program is to do that for 66 days straight. The reason that he picked 66 days is because apparently studies show that if you do the same thing 66 days in a row or more, you've instilled a habit. And so that's the idea here, is do it for a minimum of 66 days, and that will become much easier to get up at the crack of dawn. And it has, and I do it to this day. I don't do it every single day. I do it Monday through Friday at the very least. And I let myself, quote unquote, sleep in on the weekends. Now my body is genuinely used to this, because when come 5 o'clock, my body is just waking up anyway. So it's a challenge to even sleep in these days, but it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me a lot about making and keeping commitments to myself. And it taught me about that time that you really want to spend on yourself, because we as people, I think, neglect ourselves more than anybody else in our lives. It's so easy to break your own commitments to yourself. It's so easy to say, I'll get to that thing tomorrow. I'll get to that new business idea at some point. And you never do, unless you learn and teach yourself how important that is. And you have to go through these experiences, in my opinion, like the 5 a.m. club 66 days, like 75 hard, which is 75 days of doing these certain tasks that you commit to doing each and every one of those days. There's something very eye-opening about that once you go through it and realize, man, you start to realize to yourself, like when you make a new commitment to yourself and you go to break it, you stop and you're like, wait a minute, this is something I told myself I'm going to do. How am I going to feel if I don't do it? And I think that those kinds of things for a lot of people where they don't make that connection is where things like anxiety and depression start to bubble up, because you're breaking those commitments to yourself. You are saying, oh, yeah, that's a great business idea, or, oh, that's a great idea for a piece of content. I'll get to it. I'll do it. I'll do it tomorrow. And tomorrow comes and goes because of all the distractions in life. And then you say, I'll do it the next day. And then eventually you just stop thinking about it. But your mind, your unconscious mind, doesn't forget, and it weighs on your mind, and it starts to get filled up with noise. And that's where that anxiety comes in. That's where that depression comes in for a lot of people.
And to add to your little tidbit there too, about your mind and all that nonsense and all that noise in your head, you start talking down to yourself, talking that bullshit to yourself and talking negatively about yourself because I should have done this. I should have done that. Instead of I should have done this, I should have done that. We got to wake up and we just got to put our best foot forward and don't overload the start of your day with a whole ton of stuff. Honestly, start with little small minuscule things. And we can always add to those goals 1 or 2 things in the morning. And if you feel comfortable after a week or 2 of doing 1 or 2 things that you really need to get done every day, add another one in. And then maybe add another one in a couple weeks later. But if you find your threshold's 2 or 3, just leave it at that. And that's how you feel accomplished. Stacking these things, these little small milestones and stuff like that throughout the day. They don't have to be big, gigantic dreams of yours. Make them small, little attainable goals at the end of the day. And that's how you stack them into big dreams. Like I'm sure Mark's business didn't grow overnight, did it?
No, it didn't. It didn't. Yeah, it is all
I'm sure you
about.
would have thought you wished it did, but
Oh,
like
sure.
most other people, this is going to be the best one. It's going to blow up overnight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is all about the small actionable steps. It's creating progress, no matter how small that looks or you think that progress looks, and being okay with the fact that it's a small step. Again, going back to what I believe is my ADD is if it's too small of a step, my brain wants to go further. My brain wants me to take a much bigger leap because my brain thinks you got to get there quickly, and probably thinks unconsciously, it's probably thinking because you're going to get distracted by something else. So you got to get to that end goal quicker. But the truth is that creating those small actionable steps creates momentum. And when you have that momentum builds, and when you tell yourself, I'm going to do, like with 75 hard, I was not a reader. I didn't read books. I told people I don't read books. But 75 hard, one of their
bullshit, Mark.
It is bullshit because I do read books now. And that's due in part to 75 hard because one of those daily tasks is to read 10 pages a day. And that seemed so much more obtainable to me to think I only have to read 10 pages. And once you get that out of the way, then you start to realize, oh man, you start going through those motions and you start to realize, wait, I just finished 20 pages. You don't even realize it. Once you start creating that momentum, you realize I can do more than what I thought I could. And you do without even sometimes thinking about it.
When I like that you say that too. It's the same thing. The other night I started a new book. I love biographies and those types of things. So I'm sure you've heard of Sean Avery in the NHL. Little pest. But yeah, he has an awesome book. I'd suggest if anyone's looking for a good read, you want to learn about some awesome read. When I picked it up the other night, it was just sitting there. I was like, where the hell did this come from? So my fiance's like, my mom gave me that. I thought it'd be a good read for me because we're into hockey and love hockey. I picked it up and all of a sudden, next thing I know, she's like, it's time to go to bed, Chris. I was like, oh shit, I'm like 35 pages deep. I didn't even realize. Like I said, I'm just going to read the first chapter. And then here I'm in like the 3rd or 4th chapter at that point. It was just such a good book. I didn't even want to put it down. If she wouldn't have said that to me, honestly, I probably would have had half the book done and she would have been passed out snoring or whatever. She doesn't snore, I snore. But yeah, that's my ADHD and just hyper focusing on something. And I'm going to get this book done tonight.
And it probably does have something to do with the ADHD too. And I do also believe it's also it helps you go into that zone, or why can't I think of the word, or that flow. where you don't realize it and time just flies by. The next thing you thought you were going to be reading 10 pages and next thing it's 3 hours later and you're halfway through a book. And that's not just ADD. That's helping yourself get into a flow, get into that zone. And that's where all that magic happens. That's where you're more creative. That's where you're getting shit done.
Now, are you most creative first thing in the morning, maybe after that morning coffee or that workout, whatever it is you do in the morning or breakfast and stuff? And then do you start right for work then, and then maybe have a little break an hour or two in and then get back to
Yeah.
that sort of thing?
My routine is, and I started thinking ahead. See, there's my ADD going. No, so repeat your actual question again, just so I answer it
When do
accurately.
you feel most creative,
Oh, yes.
with your business?
Yeah, I'm still working on that. I'm still trying to find that zone for me. I think it is late morning. And in particular, it kicks in even more. So I do my morning routine from roughly 5 to 6. Sometimes it goes longer. Then I host a room on Clubhouse every Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern and talking all things podcasting and
What's
content.
the room called for everyone listening so we don't forget to mention that?
Sure, thank you. It's called the Podcasting Morning Chat. And
Maybe I'm going to have to join that now.
I would love for you
Get back
to.
to
Yeah, it's a
Clubhouse.
growing community. I started basically at 0 members of my club, which is called Empowered Podcasting. And we actually, by the time this airs, will be well over 800 people in there.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's still growing. So for those people who think that Clubhouse no longer works, Clubhouse is dead, it's not true. It works. Anything can work if you
It
put
works if you work it.
exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, so come 8 o'clock, I'll usually have a bite to eat, have some more coffee. And when I go to take my shower is where the creativity really starts to kick in for me. I start getting all sorts of ideas, content ideas for clients. Things come to me in the shower. And so by the time I come down to sit down, it's usually, I don't know, 9:30. I will be ready to go with working on something creative. And I do like to start my day with some creativity because if I find if I spend it first housekeeping, if you will, and going through my emails and going through these episodes for this client and these episodes for that, my creativity starts to get sucked out of me because I'm being more practical. That just kills creativity, at least for me. So that's what I do. Yeah.
If I have a creative idea, if I'm not going to film it at that time or do something, I'll write it down in my notes too. Hey, this is going to be my next reel, or I like this quote. I'm going to turn this into a reel sort of thing, somehow, some way into a reel. Those types of things. That's what I do. Like our good friend Travis Brown says that you got that orphanage of ideas. Write it down if you're not going to do it right away, because you can go back to it at a time where maybe you're stuck on an idea. Open that orphanage book up of yours with all that stuff that you've written down, and boom, you got hundreds of ideas or however many ideas you've written down at that point.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm glad you brought up Travis and I'm glad you brought up that particular point because Travis, because he's written down so many ideas, he has been able to share those ideas with people through social media using reels to share these what seems like millions of different ideas. He's sharing them and basically saying, take this idea, run with it, do something with it. And it's really what got him to go viral. He's had multiple posts that are well over 1 million. Some
He's
over
over just under 3 months ago, not even, he wasn't even at 10,000 followers.
and now he's over 100,000.
It's
And
insane.
so you never know how those ideas will be a benefit to you. It may not be that you do anything with them, but you might share them with somebody, and that may catapult you into a whole other category you never thought you'd reach.
And trust me, I will, and I am going to take a couple of those ideas and run with them once everything's started. Like we've talked about earlier in the show, get certain things done first, then start going on to the next thing. So trust me, those ideas are in the back of they've been written down or saved somewhere on the webs or the phone for myself too.
Exactly.
Before we get going though, Mark, I got one last question, but I do believe we have a special guest coming on.
Oh, yes, we do.
We got a special guest, everyone. I should have mentioned that earlier. Got a really special guest coming on here to answer one of the questions today.
Yeah.
Important one.
And we do need to set this up a little bit, right? So
No worries.
you asked for this special guest, probably because you've seen it on my social media.
Oh yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the Muppets and in particular of Kermit the Frog and all my life. And
How did that start, Mark?
I'm honestly, my parents put Sesame Street on for me when I was probably 3 years old or even younger,
Yeah.
and never looked back. And then I got into the Muppet shows and the Muppet movies, and Kermit always being the main guy. I just gravitated to him. I liked him at being a leader. I liked he was like a realistic leader. He wasn't just walking around higher than thou. He was just another one of the guys just leading the troops. And I just fell in love with him. And I had, as an adult, I don't, even over the past 4 or 5 years, I just got it in my head that I really wanted an authentic Kermit the Frog puppet. I always did the voice of Kermit. Well, actually, when Jim Henson died in the early 90s, I
Yeah.
was pretty torn up about it. And I remember became obsessed with learning the voice. And I'm not claiming I do the voice as well as the guys that do it now, but I do think I do a pretty darn good impression.
You
And
guys, you do a great job, man. I've seen lots of your reels. For anyone listening, go over and check Mark out over on Instagram. I will drop all his links and everything in the show notes for this, but you got to go check out his Kermit impressions. And we're going to get it on the show today too.
yeah, and I went and I ended up joining a Facebook group or two of these people who were recreating Muppets and making these puppets from scratch. And I ended up becoming friendly with one guy who actually happened to do some work with Jim Henson's company over time, and completely unrelated to the Muppets, but nonetheless, it makes it feel that much more authentic to me because he eventually started making a Kermit. And once he started sending me pictures, I told him I have to have it. I want that puppet because it looked so real and so authentic. And we talked about it. It was ready. He charged me a fair amount of money, and because it was completely handmade and made to scale. This is probably, of all the ones I've seen done, this really, if I told you this was an authentic Kermit the Frog puppet, you'd probably believe me. So he sent it to me, and yeah, and so I got it. So here is Kermit for those watching. And yeah, he's ready to take your question now. I'm not going to go as far as going off screen and hiding myself. So you got to
No worries.
be watching, you got to play along.
It's
Jim
okay.
Henson didn't do this very often either, but he did do it. If you go and look at the old Tonight Show stuff, he would often have Kermit sitting there with him doing his thing. And Jim Henson always believed that it didn't matter whether you moved your mouth or not while you were voicing the puppet, because if you're doing it right, all our eyes are on the puppet, and nobody cares that you're moving your mouth at that point.
And I don't give a shit on this show.
Do I?
Nobody lie. I don't care. So anyways, Kermit, what does mental health mean to you today?
Oh, wow, that's a tough question for a frog. Having a lot of experience with the Muppets, I've certainly learned a thing or two about mental health. I know that it affects how we think, how we feel, how we act. I think that when a lot of people hear the words mental health, they associate the term with mental health disorders, which I believe isn't the case at all. I think we need to do a better job communicating the differences of mental health and mental health disorders and start focusing more on all the great things we do to improve our mental health. Hey, did you see the movie Muppets Take Manhattan?
I have seen it at one point or another.
Okay, there was a scene where I talked about whisper campaigns, the opposite of guerrilla marketing. But really, I believe a whisper campaign is what's needed to raise awareness because it's all about having discussions with each other and about our mental health. And it's about not being ashamed of your challenges. And it's about finding ways together to find a big focus on how we become healthier mentally. Because I think that if we're healthy mentally, then our physical health usually improves and vice versa. And healthy minds and bodies can do amazing things to make this world a better place. Just like I heard you talking about wanting to spread kindness. I think that's how you do it, is by having conversations with each other and learning from each other and working to improve our health mentally. There you go.
Thank you so much for that amazing answer and addition to the show, Kermit.
You're very welcome.
I hope
And
you
you
have a
can catch
great
me
rest
on
of your
Disney
day.
Plus anytime.
Thank you, buddy. And we'll be sure to check you out sometime on Disney Plus.
Thank you.
There he goes. I'll actually keep him right here as we wrap up.
Thanks again, Mark. That was amazing. Kermit, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
But before we go though, Mark, where can everyone find you?
If they don't think if they don't think I'm insane, yeah, they can.
What are your socials? What is your email? Where can they find your website?
Yeah, so I'm very big right now on growing my Instagram. So I would ask that if I resonated at all with anybody today, please check me out on Instagram. It's Marc Ronick, and that's Mark with a C, and Ronick, Ronick. So it's at Marc Ronick. You can find me there. Clubhouse, same thing, at Marc Ronick. And my website is ironicmedia.com. That's IRONICK media.com. And I'm helping people launch their podcasts, and I'm helping people grow their podcasts. Probably by the time this episode comes out, I will have a new package that is very heavily focused on how to grow your podcast. I've had my own podcast. It's on a hiatus at the moment because I'm so focused on my business, but I've had one for about 10 years. It's had over 1 million downloads over our time. And I want to show people how I was able to do that. And I'm going to do it through this program. More to come on that. And like I said, probably by the time this comes out, it'll be ready. If not, stay on the lookout. It should be out.
Thank you again, Mark, for the great conversation about mental health, ADD, and just about life and self-growth, man. It was a pleasure chatting with you today, man. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on the show.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. I'm glad that we finally got to do this. I know we've tried for a couple months here, and I'm glad we finally put it together. And always appreciate a good conversation about this. Appreciate that you're doing this show because I think it's really helpful. Talk about what Kermit said. It's really creating conversation around mental health and not making it sound so scary. And instead, your show is helping to show that, you know, if we improve, if we work on our mental health and get healthier, a lot of great things come of that.
100%. If just work on that mindset of yours, work on that physical health, all those types of things. Have that growth mindset, people. Don't have that fixed mindset, being stuck in those ruts. If you're learning and willing to grow, think great things do happen. Every failure is a success to me.
Yeah. And let me leave you with this because this is something my wife has been saying a lot, and I think she heard it somewhere else. When it comes to our mental health, and I'm not saying this for everybody because I do know there are physical reasons why sometimes people have challenges along the way with their mental health. And overall, I do believe that a lot of our struggles have to do with the way we perceive things, and it has to do with how we respond to things, because I think that we naturally want to react to life and to things that happen, good, bad. We will be quick to react. And the truth is, we can't control those things that are happening outside that are affecting us in our lives. We can't control those things. We can control how we react or respond. And if we can stop before we react and decide how we want to respond to that situation, that is where the mental health improves. That's where you get stronger, because that's the only thing we can control is our response. So think about it before you react and give the response that you want to give to that situation. If you've got things terrible going on at work, sure, okay, they might be terrible in this moment. How are you going to make them better? Stop wallowing in the fact that things suck right now, because all you're going to get is more suck. So instead, how are you going to react to this? How are you going to respond to this? And once you realize, okay, this is a problem, this is a challenge, what am I going to do to get around this? Or what am I going to do to get through this? And if it's for an emotional reason, then you're reacting. If you can give yourself some time to be logical and think about how to respond, that's where everything starts to take the turn in the right direction.
Thank you so much for leaving us with those words. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Make sure you think about it. Think it through, even if it's for 5-10 minutes before you respond. You don't have to react right away. It's one thing that I really have been working on the last couple of years, as I used to just react like this. And usually it wasn't good when I reacted either. And I love that you point out, if you're just going to wallow in your own self-pity, how bad something is, it's never going to get better. How are you going to make it better, like Mark said?
And if somebody cuts you off when you're driving, you have a choice at that moment. You can do what I know I used to do way too much, which was to react and to get mad and get my heart pounding and wanting to lash out at that person. And instead of responding and recognizing that they're probably going through some kind of shit right now. They might be distracted because they've had a death in the family. They might be distracted because they're late for some life-changing appointment, whatever that is, or they could just be having a shitty day. And if you can change your perspective and stop making it about you and recognizing they've probably got something going on, let's let this go. I can't control what they just did. Man, is that a weight lifted off your shoulders when you can do that?
100%. Just learn to let things go and slide and move on with your day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man. It was a pleasure to have you on the show, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you.